Good morning and welcome. I'm Theo De Jager. I'm a farmer from South Africa. I farm avocados, macadamias and timber. I'm also the president of the World Farmers Organization, which is based here in Rome. I want to share with you a few ideas on innovation and climate change. Remember, farmers, we are not trained scientists. Fortunately, more and more are. We are very much dependent on science and the engineers to come up with innovation. But from our angle, there where you need to produce from the soils, there are a number of needs and a number of perspectives which we found in common with farmers across the globe. There's an agribusinessman in South Africa who invited me for coffee in his office, and when I stepped in, there was a picture on his wall of Broadway in 1900, and the whole street was filled with horses and cartridges. Now, this is not the photograph in his office, but the one in his office had amongst all those horses one car. And on the other side of his office, there was another picture 10 years later. And the whole of Broadway was full of cars. And there was one horse. Something extraordinary happened in 10 years. And when I asked him about these two pictures, he said to me, this is to remind me how to approach my job every day. He said the sad part of these stories is that the horses did nothing wrong. Their only sin was not to understand the meaning of that one car. They did not realize that in 10 years from now, they themselves would become absolute. That there would be no more need for horses. They were still concentrating on how strong a horse could be, how cheap it could be. They thought mankind would forever need transport, and therefore their future would be safe. When that one car came in, it already predicted their end. 10 years later, when the car came in, it did not matter how many horses you had, how strong they were, what their prices were, because we saw a radical paradigm shift. This is not change. This is a shifting paradigm. And today, we are living in a time where the first cars are appearing amongst the horses in agriculture. And the big issues today, the cars, the game changers are twofold. For agriculture, it is climate and digitalization. And most probably in 10 years from now, many of us would have forgotten how we operated before this happened. It is not as if it's something that is going to happen. This is not the future. The future is already here. It's just very unevenly distributed across the globe. And this is what I need to discuss with you. The linkage between innovation, especially in terms of digitalization of agriculture, and climate. When we talk of climate and climate change, farmers across the globe are usually, in every country, a very conservative group of people, usually the most conservative part of society. And we seldom engage in discussions on why it is changing, how did it come about. We only know that we are the most vulnerable people on the planet to climate change because we are dependent on the climate in our day-to-day production and our lives on the farm. We need to do something. Knowing that we are the most vulnerable, we also know very few industries can do more about it in a shorter space of time and cheaper than we can do ourselves. Hence, in the World Farmers Organization, we launched the Climakers program in Katowice at the end of last year. To be very honest, the Climakers was born from sheer frustration with the distance in the debates at the United Nations, the EU, all the global platforms, and real life on a farm. We seldom hear anything in these debates that matches our experience on farms. So this is nothing but a farmer's agenda on climate change. And it's not rocket science. Climakers is simply a program in which we have partnered up with every farmers organization we could find on the face of the earth. Also those who are not our members in the World Farmers Organization. And also industry bodies for mechanization, for fertilizers, for agrochemicals, for agricultural financing. And with them, we are organizing workshops in every corner of the world. We've just had our workshop in the Caribbean. In 2 weeks' time, we'll have our workshop in Europe, in Brussels. And at these workshops, we ask farmers as close as possible to grassroots level these two questions. What can you do on your farm every day to mitigate and to adapt to climate change? What are your plans? What works for you? And secondly, what will it take to get it done? And then we try to share these experiences, knowing that the answers we get from Africa will be vastly different from those in Asia. New Zealand farmers farm so much different from those in Latin America. But there are technologies and innovations which are applicable across the globe. One of the first answers, which we already see coming to the surface, has to do with soil health. Farmers tell us, you want healthier foods, get healthier soils. You want to mitigate to climate change, start with the remedies, start with healthy soils. You know, if you farm dairy, the basis is healthy soils. So let's concentrate on the basics, says our farmers. We hope at the end to have a whole manual of experiences and ideas and shared experience. But from there, we know we live in the era of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. This is probably the biggest game changer that agriculture has seen in the last 100 years, ever since the Industrial Revolution, ever since mechanization. This thing is replacing the hand hoe on the continent which I call home, all over Africa. I have visited 44 countries in Africa over the last 5 years, met with the poorest of smallholder farmers in the deepest corners of Africa. What is different today to 5 years ago is even the poorest farmer families have access these days to mobile technology. You can talk to them. You can send them an SMS if it's not a WhatsApp or a posting. And this must open up opportunities for extension, for linkages to markets, for price discovery, for the globalization of food systems. Because you see, every farmer today is in competition with the best other farmers in the world. The world became a very small place for farmers. And if we do not want to leave anyone behind, we need different ways of communicating and harvesting data. This is the most important part for us in terms of innovation in agriculture. Much of it has to do with where and how digitalization can be harnessed to advance primary production, not only in what we grow, but also how we grow it and how we distribute it. Because although we have 821 million people today on the planet, mostly in the global south, who live lower than the breadline, who do not enjoy household food security. There's enough food in the world. Since the Second World War, we've always had enough food in the world. The food is just not where the people are hungry. And it takes too much these days to move it to where people are hungry. Innovation in the food chain starts with new ways of financing inputs. We have piloted a few projects on value chain financing, on insurance-based financing, on data-based financing, mostly to replace land as security, as collateral. We are working on financing through digital currencies instead of approaching banks. And one of the strongest players that approached the field today is the insurance business. Because insurance is a massive data harvesting tool. You see, when you insure anything on a farm, or when you take out insurance, you insure something. You insure 10 head of cattle or 500 hectares of rapeseed. And through the insurance system, you harvest a lot of production data and also biological data. And insurance is one of our biggest tools to fight the risks under climate change. So many African countries, my own in South Africa, the Zimbabweans, Botswana, even Malawi, are trying to find ways for the state to subsidize or incentivize insurance. It's about inputs, about new varieties of seeds, fertilizers that can target a specific need in a specific plant, agrochemicals. The mechanization we have today is planets away from what we have a mere 5 years ago, with robotics, with independent machines, without drivers, with a SIM card in every tractor and every spray card and every planter and every harvester. With animal health care. Animal health care these days are very close in terms of innovation to human health care. And then, of course, on the input side, in standards. In Europe, when I visit farmers, I always have spent some time to explain how standards in Europe is an input cost for us who export to Europe. In real life, no farmer produces only perfect food. In every orchard, on every field, you also have misformed food, ugly fruits. Nothing wrong with it. It just does not meet the standard on the eye. And much of that gets lost on the farm already because of the way we think of food. Remember, consumers buy with their eyes. And the consumer is the most important player in the value chain. We only speak in agriculture of value chains because you cannot push a chain. You can only pull it. And the pulling force is the market. It is what the market wants. That determines what farmers can and will produce. And then, of course, labor, innovation on labor. On the production side, in terms of farming practices, and also how farmers organize themselves. For the last number of years, my home farmers association in our valley has not met because we have WhatsApp groups. One for fire, one for water, one for emergencies, one for general affairs. Digitalization took over the way in which society organizes itself. And you don't need to wait for a next meeting to get informed. You get informed in real time. On marketing, the wonderful linkages to markets. And yesterday when we met the new Director General of the FAO, this was the only topic he ached to discuss with us. He comes from China, Alibaba, and that is the new way of buying and selling. It's digital. But most important is the digitalization of communication. Not only between farmers, not only down value chains, but communication between the farmer and the market, the farmer and the consumer. Because, believe you me, In every second meeting we attend as World Farmers Organization, we find ourselves in the trenches of the battle for the hearts and minds of consumers. It's a massive battle. In Europe, you are more exposed to it because the market is much better developed. Here, a consumer does not only ask, where can I buy food today? It's all over the place. Or, what's the price of the food? Or, how healthy it is. It's only in Europe and North America where consumers also ask, where did this come from? How was this pig treated before it was slaughtered? And in that niche of the market, the top end of the market, the communication battle or the communication weapon is the most important weapon that will win or lose the war for the hearts and minds of consumers. But innovation also, where did Ariana go? There you are. I want to say something about the role of data in digitalization. When you think digitalization, you can think 80% data. I had the privilege to meet Bill Gates 2 years ago. I visited him in his office for a day. And even if I live to be 200 years old, I won't forget the message he gave me when I left his office. He said to me, data is the new gold in agriculture. Everything these days is about data. And while all the stakeholders in the value chain are running in this gold rush, don't run along with the masses. In farmers' organizations, you need to open the shops selling the spades for those who want to mine the data. Because no one has the capacity to go from farm gate to harvest data. You must create one point of entry to all the available data. And when we talk data, we talk about biological data. Who's the farmer? How big is his family? Where is he? Production data. What does he produce? How much of it? When does he produce it? Logistics data. How to get the inputs to the farm and how to get the farm produce to the market or to the processor. The marketing data. Data on supply and data on demand. Data on price. Very important for us in Africa, where price discovery mechanisms is very poor. And recently, for example, we found that Zimbabwean tobacco and cotton farmers get on average only 15% of the global average back on the farm for their produce. They were exploited because they did not know, they did not have access to global data. Weather data, short and long term, early warning systems for disaster, geospatial data, mapping, soil data, in terms of the health and nutrition of soils, about soil conservation, and then machine-driven data. You know, when I'm here in Europe, I still switch on my own irrigation every day from an app on my phone, because there are moisture meters in my orchards and on my fields, and I can see when they need irrigation. I switch it on and I get a warning. I get a warning to switch off again. And the data on that is not utilized at the moment. It gets lost. But it's also the data between the tractor and the harvester and the planter for next year, the fertilizer sprayer. All of that data creates an environment in which precision farming takes place. Precision farming is the only way to produce more on less with less. Data is the precision of precision farming. And that's the farming of the future. You know, when a paradigm shift happens, it does not matter how good you were in the previous paradigm, how strong, how rich, how experienced you were. All that matters is how adaptable you are. And because of the very nature of mankind, I'm already on the wrong side of 50 to be as adaptable as I need to be, which is why I firmly believe farming is the profession for the youngsters of today. It's the profession of the future. It's this generation, those who are in school now or under 30, who has the fingers for small buttons on tablets and smartphones. They have the kind of skills you need to adapt to the future. My father is now 85 years old. When he visits my farm, he's always very curious. He snoops around in my shed and in my workshop. He wants to see what I have and how I take care of my stuff. The other day I came from the plantations from the mountain and I found him in my workshop. He was in the roof and he found a baby pram, early 1960s model with the big wheels. And he was so excited. He said to me, "Do you recognize this thing?" And I said, no. It was not ours. I bought the farm with this thing in the roof. So he said, "But you must recognize it. You were raised in exactly this kind of model, even the same color." And I said, "But I will not remember that." He said, "What you should remember is when you went to school, I dismantled it. I took off the wheels and I built you a makeshift go-kart. And you always went downhill towards the railway line." I said, "That part I remember. I remember not being able to take my turn, crashing into the fence, and I remember the bruises on my knees and my elbows." He said, "Exactly. And then you would carry it up back again for me to fix when I come back from work." I said to him, "Yes, but look at my son now. At that time, 13 years old, knows nothing about these makeshift go-karts. He sits in front of the television with his Xbox and he plays with a little lever," thinking I would get some sympathy from my father. My father's response was, "Leave him alone. You needed that go-kart to prepare you to drive the kinds of machines you operate on this farm today. And he is honing his skills for the kinds of machines he will drive on this farm one day." Thank you.